On the evening of March 22, 1990, a man stood at the door of his apartment in Brussels with his key in the lock. Someone stepped up behind him and shot him 5 times, 3 in the back, 2 in the head. A silenced pistol. No witnesses. When police arrived, the key was still hanging in the door, and inside his briefcase sat $20,000 in cash, untouched. This was not a robbery. The dead man was Gerald Bull, and he may have been the finest artillery scientist who ever lived. At the time of his murder, he was building something for Saddam Hussein that sounds like pure fiction. A gun so enormous it could fire a shell into space. To this day, nobody has been charged. No government has ever claimed it. But the strangest part of this story isn't who pulled the trigger. It's how a man like Bull ended up in Saddam's pocket at all. Because he never set out to arm dictators. He spent his entire life chasing something almost innocent. He didn't want to build a weapon. He wanted to shoot satellites into orbit. And that dream cost him everything. Gerald Bull's obsession began with a novel. As a boy in Canada, he read Jules Verne's story of men fired to the moon inside a giant cannon, and unlike every other child who read it, he never let the idea go. He was a prodigy. He earned his doctorate in ballistics in his early 20s and quickly became one of the world's foremost experts on making things fly very far, very fast. And as the space race erupted in the 1950s, while every government on Earth poured fortunes into rockets, Bull kept pointing at what he saw as an absurd waste. Think about a rocket. You build a colossal, delicate, single-use machine, fill it with explosive fuel, and destroy the entire thing to place one small satellite in orbit. Bull's alternative was brutally simple. Build one enormous gun, once, and then just keep firing satellites out of it for a tiny fraction of the cost, over and over again. In an age obsessed with rockets, Bull asked the question nobody wanted to hear. Why launch a satellite when you could simply shoot it? Everyone told him it was impossible. So he went out and proved spectacularly that it wasn't. In the 1960s, Bull convinced both the US Army and the Canadian government to fund his idea. The result was called Project HARP, the High Altitude Research Project, and its test site was a wind-swept stretch of coast on the island of Barbados. What he built there was gloriously crude. Bull took 2 decommissioned 16-inch naval cannons, the kind that once armed battleships, and welded them together into a single barrel more than 35 meters long, pointed at the sky. Then he started firing instrument packages out of it. And it worked. In 1966, one of his shells reached an altitude of 180 kilometers, nearly twice the height where space officially begins. A gun, welded together from scrapped battleship parts, had fired an object into space. That record has never been broken. A weapon built from 2 junked battleship barrels fired a shell higher than any gun in history, straight past the edge of space. Bull had proven his concept. He was, briefly, a star. And then, almost overnight, the world decided it didn't need him. The rockets won. They could carry heavier payloads, they could be steered, and crucially, a gun's monstrous acceleration crushes anything delicate inside the shell. By 1967, the funding evaporated. HARP was shut down. Bull's life's work was declared a curiosity. He refused to accept it. He set up his own private company to keep the dream alive, and to pay for it, he began selling the one thing he truly owned: his genius for artillery. He designed guns for anyone who would write a check. And in the late 1970s, that led him to apartheid South Africa, which was under a United Nations arms embargo at the time. It was a catastrophic decision. Bull was arrested, convicted of illegally exporting weapons technology, and sent to prison. When he came out, he was ruined, his reputation shredded, his company crumbling, the doors of the Western defense establishment slammed shut. The bitter irony? The howitzer he had designed for South Africa was magnificent, arguably the best artillery piece in the world, outranging everything NATO and the Soviets had. The world defunded his dream, then jailed him for chasing it, and when he walked out, only outlaws would take his calls. One of them called from Baghdad. In 1988, Saddam Hussein's Iraq made Gerald Bull an offer no one else on the planet was willing to make. Roughly $25 million to build his Supergun, his actual full-scale dream out in the Iraqi desert. In exchange, Bull would also lend his expertise to Iraq's ballistic missile program. He took it. And the scale of what he began building is genuinely difficult to picture. First came a test model, nicknamed Baby Babylon, a gun with a barrel 350 millimeters across, already larger than almost any artillery ever fielded. But Baby Babylon was only the rehearsal. The real machine, Big Babylon, was designed with a bore of 1 full meter, a barrel around 150 meters long, and a total weight of some 1,500 tons. It would have been, by an enormous margin, the largest gun ever constructed by human beings. The components were ordered from companies across Europe, Britain, Spain, France, Switzerland, declared innocently on the paperwork as petrochemical piping. The only man on Earth willing to fund a gun that could shoot into space was the one man nobody should ever have let near it. But here's the question that everything turns on. Was that thing actually a weapon at all? Bull insisted it wasn't, and his argument was surprisingly strong. A gun that size cannot be hidden. It's a 150-meter steel finger visible from orbit. It cannot be moved. It cannot really be aimed, since it's anchored into a hillside pointing one direction forever. And the instant a war started, it would be the first thing bombed. As a weapon, he argued, it was almost useless. As a satellite launcher, it was the fulfillment of his life. The people watching him weren't convinced. An Iraqi general who later defected claimed the regime had a very specific use in mind: fire a shell into space that would burst and spray sticky material across enemy spy satellites, blinding them. And there was a second, darker problem, the part of the deal nobody could excuse. Bull wasn't only building a space gun for Saddam. He was helping Iraq extend the range of its ballistic missiles, the ones that would soon be raining down on cities. Then the warnings began. His apartment in Brussels was broken into repeatedly. Things were moved, searched, disturbed. He received threats. Friends urged him to walk away from Iraq while he still could. Somebody was ransacking his home to send a message, and Gerald Bull, being Gerald Bull, kept working. On the evening of the 22nd of March, 1990, he came home. 5 bullets in Brussels. 5 shots, at close range, at his own front door. The killer took nothing, not the cash, not the briefcase, and left no trace. It was, by every professional standard, an execution. So who did it? More than 3 decades later, the honest answer is that nobody knows. The theory named most often is Israel's Mossad, which had every reason to want Iraq's missile program crippled. But no proof has ever surfaced, and no one has claimed responsibility. Other theories point to Iraq itself, silencing a man who knew too much, to Iran, to South Africa, to Western intelligence agencies, even to Chile. The case remains formally unsolved. What happened next, though, was swift and deliberate. Just 2 weeks after the murder, acting on intelligence, British customs officers seized huge steel barrel sections at a port in northern England, bound for Iraq. The pipeline was cut. After the Gulf War, United Nations inspectors demolished what remained of Project Babylon in the desert. The largest gun ever designed wasn't destroyed by an army. It was killed by 5 bullets fired into one man at his own front door. Big Babylon never fired a single shot. So that's the life of Gerald Bull, a boy who believed a Jules Verne novel, a scientist who fired a shell into space with a gun welded out of battleship scrap and set a record that still stands. A man whose own governments walked away from him, who went to prison for selling his talent to the wrong buyer, and who accepted money from a dictator to finally build the machine he'd dreamed of since childhood, and was murdered before he could switch it on. And here's the uncomfortable lesson in it. Technology has no morals. The exact same barrel that gently lifts a satellite into orbit can hurl a shell at a city. The physics doesn't care which. The only thing that decides what a machine becomes is who is paying for it. And Gerald Bull spent his whole life pretending that part didn't matter. It mattered enough to kill him. His dream, though, refuses to die. Pieces of Big Babylon's barrel sit in British museums today, and a handful of companies are quietly revisiting the very idea he was mocked for, launching payloads into space out of a gun. Bull may simply have been 60 years early, and fatally wrong about who to ask for the money. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.